But coming to the point of this panel, which is the conversation, the bridge between COP29 and the upcoming COP30 in Belém, Brazil. So before we get into anything, as we all know, COP29 was the finance COP. We came out with some wins, some big, some small, but we came out with plenty of wins at COP29. As we reflect on what was achieved, and Raza, I'd like you to kick us off here, reflecting on what we've achieved at COP29, given your role there, but also in your current position, how do you see the transition? What is at stake now? And what is the sort of high-level picture and momentum that we're getting to?
Thank you very much, and I would like to thank Public Foundation also and Trammell Cross that I'm here. It's my first EarthX, and hopefully not the last one. Yeah, so we had many of you actually in Azerbaijan, in Baku, where I'm from, a few months ago. It seems like a very, very long time ago now, and a totally different world. But even though we call it the finance COP, right? I think we had very high expectations of, because we all know, there's science, right? And we know similar to 1.5 number of the degrees, we know that we need over 1.3 trillion from the climate finance perspective. And I think even though we didn't get to that goal, we managed to triple the goal to 300 billion. But again, it's just a commitment, right? I think one big worry now, looking back, is that there's a bit of a kind of a finance fatigue in terms of the climate finance, right? Everyone talks about it, but especially in this current environment, there's not much of the action that needs to be done there. And when I look at it from the perspective, let's say, from Azerbaijan, which has been the oil and gas producer, actually, the first industrial well in the world was in Azerbaijan, I see that, okay, we have the dilemma. We have, for certain countries, like nations like my country, which was extremely poor, oil and gas, hydrocarbons bring a lot of cash, but at the same time, it's bad for we've heard a lot from ambassadors here from the small island developing nations. From what I live in London, and what I see, for example, in the UK is that the people, when it comes to the troubles, they kind of deprioritize. They forget about the planet now, for example. If you're a government in the UK, you think about Europe, you think about, okay, so I had this cash which was committed, but now I have to think about the defense. Now I have to think about the taxes. And now I have to think about the digital centers and AI. So I think what we need to do is to really keep that on the top. As Lord Fakafanua was saying, it's not far away. Now we see that it's actually coming and touching you. If you're an insurance company, you don't have the future now, because with all the solar, I was in the solar business, with the hails, if you're the banks, if you're you have basically no future. So really bringing it back home. If you're just a regular citizen, you also don't have future, because very optimistic future, because you see that it is really coming to you. So I think we need to keep talking about the finance, but also not talking about maybe making more actions and a very kind of actionable roadmap on that.
Thank you. You said some key things. You said there's a finance fatigue, and you said there's lack of action. And both of that I completely agree with. And through the day, it's just come up a few times where, especially at the UN, we keep talking, but there is lack of implementation. It just come up multiple times through the day. But Ashaki, coming to you, the position that you hold and the current, the organization that you're with, the Development Bank for Resilient Prosperity, this plays a very important role in both of these, to sort of get over the finance fatigue and to move towards action. So can you tell us a little bit more on what the role is, how did that come across, and what you're doing now?
Sure, thank you so much, Heeta, and thank you so much to colleagues for staying with us throughout the day. So I'll make 3 points, and if I make more than 3 points, don't hold it against me. One is, the idea of the bank came up because of the finance fatigue. The fact is, we have heard many times over about the resource needs of small island developing states and other vulnerable countries. But we've also heard the flip side, that while finance, sometimes we say there's a wealth of finance out there, or there's a big pot of fun, guess what? We don't have access to it. So telling me that there's money, but I don't have access, that creates a bigger issue. And the bank idea came up because we realized that you needed to have an institution that is designed not for establishing an institution's sake, but an institution that will make finance affordable to vulnerable economies. And not just from because we don't like to look at things in buckets, but we look at it from a systems approach. Climate, yes, is one problem. But overall, what we are promoting is ecological stability. And what we are saying within the COP, within other multilateral arenas, let us focus on a system-wide approach, understanding that climate is one, yes, but there are other crises that we now need to focus on. And how do we now pool our funds and do targeted investment? And that's where the action comes in, because sometimes we all know the capacity of countries within the global south, and I believe it was my colleague Angus who mentioned it earlier. You have cases where a country may have financing available to it, but the pipeline of projects, that's not there. The type of investment that you need to be targeted and strategic, that is not there. And with the bank, we're saying fit for purpose investment, financing that's affordable, and projects that promote ecological stability with the underlying thing of preservation and conservation. Because guess what? Without the planet, there's no us. So therefore, we have to make sure we take care of it. It's not a nice to have. It is what we have to do. And when you look at what's happening in a lot of our countries in the global south, we are being impacted every day by this. When I was a child, some of the beaches that we were able to go to, you cannot go to anymore because the erosion is so much. And again, through this bank, through the Development Bank for Resilient Prosperity, we're saying, how can we do nature-based solutions? So we're not saying, let's put down heavy concrete walls. And, we're saying, through nature, there are ways for us to reclaim our coastlines. There are ways for us to preserve our mangroves. And we want to see some of that being highlighted strongly within the multilateral agreements.
Thank you. I think there's something very key that you mentioned, that the planet will survive, but we will not be there. And nature is the key to ensure that we are surviving with the planet. On that note, Juan, Panama has something called a nature pledge. What is this? Can you tell us a little bit more on that?
Absolutely. Thank you for that question. So if you look at the entire landscape of environmental agreements, there are more than 15. So for each one of those, every country needs to set up a team, needs to invest in a strategy, needs to do consultations, and carry out these very long negotiations that many times don't get us to where we need to be at. The minister, Juan Carlos Navarro, and I sat down to analyze this, and we took a decision. We are not going to comply with what the system is requesting of us. So instead of submitting different strategic instruments for each one of all these agreements, we're going to take the Biodiversity Convention, the Desertification Convention, the Climate Convention, plus some commitments on plastic, and put them all together in just one international instrument that also applies to the national level. By doing this, we are cutting red tape so much. And additionally, once we started this process internally within the ministry, we realized that the previous administrations had submitted pledges for each one of these agreements that were not aligned with each other. Under the Climate Convention, we care about carbon. Under biodiversity, we care about how many jaguars and animals and plants we have in our forests. Under certification, we care about that forest not becoming a desert. It's the same piece of land that we keep splitting on different pieces, and it's taking us to inefficiency. So the Nature Pledge is basically a challenge to the system, the ownership of a country of saying, we did this wrong, we overcomplicated everything. Nature cannot be subdivided in so many different issues because ultimately nature is one complex ecosystem that we need to deal with in a holistic way, the same way that the Development Bank for Resilience is planning to do it. And that's why we joined the Development Bank for Resilience, because out there is no multilateral banking institution that actually carries this vision. And ultimately, it's very simple. Let's protect, let's restore, and let's do it together. We don't have to divide the conversation on 20 different rooms when we're talking about the same thing. So that's the Nature Pledge, and we're planning to submit it by mid-August. And next month in Panama, we're hosting the Nature Summit, the week of May 19th, and there we're gonna be showing how we have advanced on crafting this, because no one has done it before. There is no methodology, there is no protocol. We're basically creating it, and we're calling on other nations to join. And the week of May 19th, we're gonna be announcing 2 other nations that have joined this and are trying to build this movement with Panama.
Wonderful. So Juan, coming back to you actually from there, you mentioned the Nature Pledge, you've mentioned the Nature Summit. The COP is in Brazil, which is an Amazon COP. And you happen to be the Vice President of the UNFCCC COP Bureau. What is, first of all, for the audience, what does the COP Bureau mean? But what are also the things that we should look forward to for the upcoming COP when we come to an Amazon, a natural COP, hopefully, and what are the biggest stakeholders at play at this COP?
So the Bureau is basically a body that supports the COP presidency and executive secretary to carry out these negotiations. So we provide guidance on agenda setting, we provide guidance on logistics. I'm the VP for Latin America, so I have to make sure that the interests of the Latin American nations are reflected there. But I also want to take the chance to highlight something groundbreaking that happened about 3 weeks ago at the International Maritime Organization. So the Paris Agreement does not cover international maritime emissions nor international aviation emissions. So the IMO, in its environmental body, 3 weeks ago, approved the first ever sectoral levy on carbon emissions for the shipping industry. This is going to be applied starting in 2027. Next year, there are going to be some guidelines out. So basically, every vessel that is 5,000 gross ton and above will have to comply with fuel standards requirements. If they don't comply and they're below the benchmark, they will have to pay at least $100 per ton of carbon. This is expected to create from $11 to $13 billion in revenue for the net zero transition of the shipping industry. This is groundbreaking because it's legally binding. So all the IMO member parties have to comply to this. And I must admit that Panama played, of course, a huge role on this. The head of the IMO is a Panamanian, and also my deputy climate director was there working hand in hand with the private sector, specifically with Maersk, that was pushing for this levy to make sure more countries join. And that's why the chairman of Maersk is going to be the keynote at the Nature Summit in 3 weeks. So I'm going to leave it at that. I think I've spoken enough.
Thank you. Raza, coming to you again for the last concluding questions. Again, focusing on COP30, right? You mentioned you set us up with the start from looking forward from COP29. What are the things that you look forward to when it comes to COP30?
I think COP30 will be very instrumental in terms of both kind of having the NDC renewed, which hopefully will be happening, let's say, closer to September. More and more countries will be submitting it. But I think the most important part of it will be, at COP29, we realized that, well, we admitted that the private sector, without private sector money, we will not be able to make the transition. We will not be able to find the money. So I think it will be quite an instrumental part where we will build, and a lot of previous speakers mentioned that as well, without the right connection, without the right bridge between public, private, but also the shareholders, family offices, shareholders who are focusing on the wealth preservation will be coming in together, and I think that kind of a bridge has been lacking in those discussions. Usually COP was only for the governments. So I think COP30 will be an instrumental step in the mindset of how we can tackle the problem.
Thank you so much. And the last word for us, Ashaki, can you tell us a little bit on, again, the same question, what are you looking forward to at COP, but especially the role that you hope to play there?
Sure, thank you very much. And last time, yes, it was the finance COP. But we have to be clear that without finance, a lot of the things that we want to do cannot happen. So some of the things we would like to see is the inclusion or the promotion of financing instruments that promote ecological stability. So how do we incentivize it? So instead of it coming over as punitive, so we're punishing people, how do we now incentivize governments private sector, and other investors to go that route of ecological stabilizing projects. The other thing, and Riza mentioned it, and Juan as well, ensuring that there is a multi-stakeholder partnership. And for a long time, we felt that in this journey on climate, that it just had to be sovereigns. It just had to be the governments, the negotiators. But look at where Matt started off, the importance of youth groups, the importance of private sector, the importance of philanthropies, foundations. We all need to come together because we have carved out our own space, and that hasn't worked. That's why we're in the problem we are today, because the way of doing things didn't work. So therefore, all the players, we have to bring them to the table. And not because we think, oh, well, we just need to say that we had a representative from this particular grouping. The exchange, the integration has to be meaningful. And if we look at how Matt has put this day together, that is a perfect example of bringing people from various groupings to come and discuss and come up with solutions for these issues that affect us. So if I had to say, and Juan, I'm begging you, let us make sure that we have that multi-stakeholder partnership. And Matt is coming to take the mic from me. But then...
No, thank you so much. Thank you for ending us on that very, very powerful note. I think you've said some key things. It needs to be incentivized rather than punitive. And meaningful engagement. I mean, as a young person, I've been saying meaningful engagement for the past 10 years. But really, meaningful engagement at various sectors, at various stakeholders, and at various tables. So let's ensure that we have the right people in the rooms, but as we have them, we also give them the right spaces for these conversations and for the outcomes. Thank you for being here with me, and thank you for being a lovely audience.